Candidate Barack Obama got compared a lot to President John F. Kennedy. Both gave inspiring speeches. Both looked rather jaunty in a suit. Both married glamorous, charismatic women. Both had young children. Both ended up having to deal with a nuclear standoff with Russia in this hemisphere. Over 2 weeks in October 1962, the U.S. got right up in Russia's grill, and the Soviets got right up in our grill after the U.S. found that the Soviets were building missile bases in Cuba.
I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations.
That standoff 47 years ago was as close as we know we ever got to war between the superpowers. Today, the Soviet Union is no longer, and the Cold War is therefore ostensibly over. But, you know, this weekend, we learned that the Russian Air Force is talking to both Cuba and Venezuela about maybe putting some long-range Russian bombers at airfields in Cuba and Venezuela. This would be the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that Russia would have an overt military presence in this hemisphere. Then today, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev announced a, quote, comprehensive rearmament of Russia's military, saying the primary goal would be to, quote, increase the combat readiness of Russia's forces. First of all, our strategic nuclear forces. All right, first of all, the nukes. You know, that whole Cuban Missile thing was called a crisis for a reason. I may need to be talked ski down ski here. Joining us now to try is former Republican Senator Chuck Hagel, a leading foreign policy voice in the U.S. Senate for 12 years, a Vietnam combat veteran and outspoken critic of the Bush administration's Iraq war policy. He now heads the Commission on U.S. Policy Toward Russia, alongside former Senator Gary Hart. He's also chairman of the Atlantic Council of the United States, succeeding General James Jones, who left to become National Security Advisor to President Obama. Senator Hagel, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, thank you very much.
You have just returned from Moscow, where I know you met with the Russian president. Are they really being as aggressive militarily as it seems like they are being?
Rachel, I think we first always have to deal with the realities of any nation's national interests. I would start answering your question by saying this. As you led into your show regarding the Cuban Missile Crisis, today's Russia is not yesterday's Soviet Union. The leaders today are different. Sovereign nations will protect their own national interests. I think, at least in my sense of spending the last 5 days in Russia and being part of a foreign policy arena that studied these kinds of things and had significant exchanges and engagements with these people over the years, that we have an opportunity today to take this relationship, which is a very critical relationship for our country, for Russia, for the world, and move it to some high ground. We live in a world, Rachel, and you know this, most people do, that's combustible, dangerous, complicated, interconnected. When we met with Medvedev, we met with all the national security senior people there, as well as the foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov, others. I think they, too, are looking for a way to be able to cooperate in a new way to address the great challenges that face Russia and the United States. We are now interconnected into these areas where every major challenge we have, our national interests, Iran, Iraq, North Korea, energy, environment, Western Europe, Ukraine, Georgia, is connected into Georgia. Their national interests are connected into our national interests. And we've got to be smart and wise in how we now move this relationship back onto a track that is far more productive. Last point I'd make, there are disagreements. There will be disagreements. But we should define our relationship based on common interests, not on disagreements.
In terms of the way that we talk about national security, Vice President Dick Cheney is criticizing the new president, criticizing President Obama here sort of right out of the gate, something that other newly turfed out vice presidents and presidents have avoided at least for a few years. What do you make of Vice President Dick Cheney's allegation that President Obama has made the U.S. less safe? He's been rather bellicose about that recently.
Well, that's ridiculous. that has no merit on fact or by any measurement. Come on, this guy hasn't even been in office 2 months. The mess that the Bush administration left the Obama administration, I'm a Republican. We ran up more than a third of the nation's national debt under a Republican president and a Republican Congress 6 out of the last 8 years. We got America into 2 wars. We've done great damage to our economy, to our force structure, to our standing in the world. And for a vice president who participated in that, who led in that, to come on and say that this new administration has really put America in danger is just folly. Now, maybe in 4 years that will be the case. I don't know. We'll see. But to say that now makes no sense, and I'm sorry the vice president said that.
Senator Hagel, one last question for you. Since you left the Senate, the Republican Party chairman has threatened to run primary challengers against Senators Snowe and Collins and Specter because they voted with the Democrats on the stimulus bill. I wonder if that makes you happy that you are no longer in the Senate. I wonder if you think that's not a wise move.
It's not a wise move. It's a very foolish move. You know, Rachel, those of us who have had the privilege and do still have the privilege of serving this country in some capacity take an oath of office to the Constitution to do what we think is right for our country. We don't take an oath of office to our president, to our party, to any other allegiance than the Constitution. If you are governed by what you think is right for your country, you're going to be fine. And have these kind of nutty prescriptions out there by either party saying you have to have a total party loyalty dynamic to you or will threaten you or run you out of office. That's not going to work. Listen, I think Snowe and Collins are so overwhelmingly popular in Maine you could run anybody against them and they'd beat them. I think Specter is doing pretty well. He has done pretty well in Pennsylvania based on what he thinks is right for his state and his country. There's no room for that kind of silliness in this business. I think that was what this election was all about. People expect serious people to deal with serious issues and to govern seriously. And when you don't do that, you become irrelevant.
Former Republican Senator Chuck Hagel, it is a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Rachel, thank you.